23. Topeka. The room was huge, the size of a football field. It was furnished sparsely, just a few tables scattered about. Inside the room, voices echoed as the technicians called to each other, positioning the pieces of wreckage. The post team was reconstructing the wreck in this room, placing the clumps of twisted metal from the Phantom in the same positions as they had been found on the sand. Only then would the intensive examinations begin. Major Manchek, tired, bleary-eyed, clutching his coffee cup, stood in a corner and watched. To him, there was something surrealistic about the scene. A dozen men in a long, whitewashed room in Topeka, rebuilding a crash. One of the physicists came up to him, holding a clear plastic bag. He raised the contents under Manchek's nose. "Just got it back from the lab," he said. "What is it?" "You'll never guess." The man's eyes gleamed in excitement. "All right," Manchek thought irritably. "I'll never guess. What is it?" A deploymerized polymer," the biochemist said, smacking his lips with satisfaction. "Just back from the lab." "What kind of polymer?" A polymer was a repeating molecule, built up from thousands of the same units, like a stack of dominoes. Most plastics, nylon, rayon, plant cellulose, and even glycogen in the human body were polymers. A polymer of the plastic used on the air hose of the Phantom jet, the face mask to the pilot. We thought as much. Manchek frowned. He looked slowly at the crumbly black powder in the bag. Plastic? Yes, a polymer. Depolymerized. It was broken down. Now that's no vibrations effect. It's a biochemical effect. Purely organic. Slowly, Manchek began to understand. "You mean something tore the plastic apart?" "Yes, you could say that," the biochemist replied. "It's a simplification, of course, but—" "What tore it apart?" The biochemist shrugged. "Chemical reactions of some sort? Acid could do it, or intense heat, or a microorganism, I suppose. If one existed that could eat plastic. If you know what I mean." "I think," Manchek said, "that I know what you mean." He left the room and went to the cable transmitter, located in another part of the building. He wrote out his message to the wildfire group and gave it to the technician to transmit. While he waited, he said, "Has there been any reply yet?" "Reply, sir?" the technician said. "From wildfire," Manchek said. It was incredible to him that no one had acted upon the news of the Phantom crash. It was so obviously linked. "Wildfire, sir?" the technician asked. Manchek rubbed his eyes. He was tired. He would have to remember to keep his big mouth shut. "Forget it," he said. After his conversation with Peter Jackson, Hall went to see Burton. Burton was in the autopsy room, going over his slides from the day before. Hall said, "Find anything?" Burton stepped away from the microscope and sighed. "No, nothing." "I keep wondering," Hall said, "about that insanity. Talking with Jackson's reminded me of it. A large number of people in that town went insane. Or at least became bizarre and suicidal. During the evening, many of those people were old." Burton frowned. "So?" "Old people," Hall said. "All like Jackson. They have lots wrong with them. Their bodies are breaking down in a variety of ways. The lungs are bad. The hearts are bad. The livers are shot. The vessels are sclerotic. And this alters the disease process. Perhaps, I keep wondering, what makes a person become rapidly insane? Burton shook his head. And there's something else, Hall said. Jackson recalls hearing one victim say, just before he died, "Oh God, my head." Burton stared away into space. Just before death? Just before. You're thinking of hemorrhage? Hall nodded. It makes sense, he said, at least to check. If the Andromeda strain produced hemorrhage inside the brain for any reason, then it might produce rapid, unusual mental aberrations. But we already know the organism acts by clotting. Yes, Hall said. In most people. Not all. Some survive and some go mad. Burton nodded. He suddenly became excited. Suppose that the organisms acted by causing damage to blood vessels. This damage would initiate clotting. Anytime the wall of a blood cell was torn or cut or burned, then the clotting sequence would begin. First, platelets would clump around the injury, protecting it, preventing blood loss. Then red cells would accumulate. Then a fibrin mesh would bind all the elements together. And finally, the clot would become hard and firm. That was the normal sequence. But if the damage was extensive, if it began at the lungs and worked its way... I'm wondering, Hall said, if our organisms attacks vessels' walls. If so, it would initiate clotting. But if clotting were prevented in certain persons, then the organisms might eat away and cause hemorrhage in those persons. And insanity, Burton said, hunting through his slides. He found 3 of the brain and checked them. No question. The pathology was striking. Within the internal layer of cerebral vessels were small deposits of green. Burton had no doubt that, under higher magnification, they would turn out to be hexagonal in shape. Quickly, he checked the other slides, for vessels in lung, liver, and spleen. In several instances, he found green spots in the vessel walls, but never in the profusions he found for cerebral vessels. Obviously, the Andromeda strain showed a predilection for cerebral vasculature. It was impossible to say why, but it was known that the cerebral vessels are peculiar in several respects. For instance, under circumstances in which normal body vessels dilate or contract, such as extreme cold or exercise, the brain vasculature does not change, but maintains a steady, constant blood supply to the brain. In exercise, the blood supply to muscle might increase 5 to 20 times, but the brain always has a steady flow. Whether its owner is taking an exam or a nap, chopping wood or watching TV, the brain receives the same amount of blood every minute, hour, day. The scientists did not know why this should be or how. Precisely, the cerebral vessels regulate themselves. But the phenomenon is known to exist, and cerebral vessels are regarded as a special case among the body's arteries and veins. Clearly something is different about them. And now there was an example of an organism that destroys them preferentially. But as Button thought about it, the action of Andromeda did not seem so unusual. For example, syphilis causes an inflammation of the aorta, a very specific, peculiar reaction. Schistosomiasis, a parasitic infection, shows a preference for bladder, intestine, or colonic vessels, depending on the species. So such specificity was not impossible. But there's another problem, he said. In most people, the organism begins clotting at the lungs. We know that. Presumably, vessel destruction begins there as well. What is different about... He stopped. He remembered the rats he had anticoagulated, the ones who had died anyway, but had had no autopsies. My God, he said. He drew out one of the rats from cold storage and cut it open. It bled. Quickly he incised the head, exposing the brain. There he found a large hemorrhage over the grey surface of the brain. You've got it, Hall said. If the animal is normal, it dies from coagulations, beginning at the lungs. But if coagulations is prevented, then the organism erodes through the vessels of the brain, and hemorrhage occurs. An insanity. Yes, Button was now very excited, and coagulation could be prevented by any blood disorder, or too little vitamin K. Malabsorption syndrome, poor liver functions, impaired protein synthesis, any of a dozen things. All more likely to be found in an old person's, Hall said. Did Jackson have any of those things? Hall took a long time to answer, then finally said, no, he has liver disease, but not significantly. But inside, then we're back where we started. Not quite, because Jackson and the baby both survived. They didn't hemorrhage, as far as we know. They survived untouched, completely untouched. Meaning that they somehow prevented the primary process, which is invasion of the organisms into the vessel walls of the body. The Andromeda organism didn't get to the lungs or the brain. It didn't get anywhere. But why? We'll know that, Hall said, when we know why a 69-year-old sterno drinker with an ulcer is like a 2-month-old baby. They seem pretty much opposites, Button said. They do, don't they? Hall said. It would be hours before he realized Button had given him the answer to the puzzle, but an answer that was worthless. 24. Evaluation. Sir Winston Churchill once said that true geniuses resides in the capacity for evaluation of uncertain, hazardous, and conflicting information. Yet it is a peculiarity of the Wildfire team that, despite the individual brilliance of team members, the group grossly misjudged the information at several points. One is reminded of Montaigne's acerbic comment, "Men under stress are fools, and fool themselves." Certainly, the Wildfire team was under severe stress, but they were also prepared to make mistakes. They had even predicted that this would occur. What they did not anticipate was the magnitude, the staggering dimensions of their error. They did not expect that their ultimate error would be a compound of a dozen small clues that were missed, a handful of crucial facts that were dismissed. The team had a blind spot, which Stone later expressed this way: "We were problem-oriented. Everything we did and thought was directed toward finding a solution, a cure to Andromeda. And of course, we were fixed on the events that had occurred at Piedmont. We felt that if we did not find a solution, no solution would be forthcoming, and the whole world would ultimately wind up like Piedmont. We were very slow to think otherwise." The era began to take on major proportions with the cultures. Stone and Levitt had taken thousands of cultures from the original capsule. These had been incubated in a wide variety of atmospheric temperature and pressure conditions. The results of this could only be analyzed by computer. Using the growth transmatrix program, the computer did not print out results from all possible growth combinations. Instead, it printed out only significant positive and negative results. It did this after first weighing each petri dish and examining any growth with its photoelectric eye. When Stone and Levitt went to examine the results, they found several striking trends. Their first conclusion was that growth media did not matter at all. The organism grew equally well on sugar, blood, chocolate, plain agar, or sheer glass. However, the gases in which the plants were incubated were crucial, as was the light. Ultraviolet light stimulated growth under all circumstances. Total darkness, and to a lesser extent infrared light, inhibited growth. Oxygen inhibits growth in all circumstances, but carbon dioxide stimulated growth. Nitrogen had no effect. Thus, best growth was achieved in 100% carbon dioxide, lighted by ultraviolet radiation. Poorest growth occurred in pure oxygen, incubated in total darkness. "What do you make of it?" Stone said. "It looks like a pure conversion system," Levitt said. "I wonder," Stone said. He punched through the coordinates of a closed growth system. Closed growth systems studied bacterial metabolisms by measuring intake of gases and nutrients, and output of waste products. They were completely sealed and self-contained. A plant in such a system, for example, would consume carbon dioxide and give off water and oxygen. Culture Dizig 779.223 187 Andromeda Media Dizig 779 Atmosphere Design 223 Lumen Design L87 UVHI Final Scanner Print. An example of a scanner printout from the photoelectric eye that examined all growth media. Within the circular petri dish, the computer has noted that presence of two separate colonies. The colonies are red, in 2 mm square segments, and graded by density on a scale from 1 to 9. But when they looked at the Andromeda strain, they found something remarkable. The organisms had no excretions. If incubated with carbon dioxide and ultraviolet light, it grew steadily until all carbon dioxide had been consumed. Then growth stopped. There was no excretion of any kind, of gas or waste products at all. No waste. Clearly efficient, Stone said. You'd expect that, Levitt said. This was an organism highly suited to its environment. It consumed everything, wasted nothing. It was perfect for the barren existence of space. He thought about this for a moment, and then it hit him. It hit Levitt at the same time. Good Christ! Levitt was already reaching for the phone. Get Robertson, he said. Get him immediately. Incredible, Stone said softly. No waste. It doesn't require growth media. It can grow in the presence of carbon, oxygen, and sunlight, period. I hope we are not too late, Levitt said, watching the computer console screen impatiently. Stone nodded. If this organism is really converting matter to energy, and energy to matter, directly, then it's functioning like a little reactor and an atomic detonation. Incredible, Stone said. Just incredible. The screen came to life. They saw Robertson looking tired, smoking a cigarette. Jeremy, you've got to give me time. I haven't been able to get through to... Listen, Stone said. I want you to make sure Directive 712 is not carried out. It is imperative no atomic device must be detonated around the organisms. That's the last thing in the world, literally, that we want to do. He explained briefly what he had found. Robertson whistled. We just provide a fantastically rich growth medium. That's right, Stone said. The problem of a rich growth medium was a peculiarly distressing one to the wildfire team. It was known, for example, that checks and balances exist in the normal environment. These managed to dampen the exuberant growth of bacteria. The mathematics of uncontrolled growth are frightening. A single cell of the bacterium E. coli would, under ideal circumstances, divide every 20 minutes. That is not particularly disturbing until you think about it. But the fact is that bacteria multiply geometrically. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, and so on. In this way, it can be shown that in a single day, one cell of E. coli could produce a supercolony equal in size and weight to the entire planet Earth. This never happens, for a perfectly simple reason. Growth cannot continue indefinitely under ideal circumstances. Food runs out. Oxygen runs out. Local conditions within the colony change and check the growth of organisms. On the other hand, if you had an organism that was capable of directly converting matter to energy, and if you provided it with a huge rich source of energy, like an atomic blast, I'll pass along your recommendations to the president, Robertson said. He'll be pleased to know he made the right decisions on the 712. You can congratulate him on his scientific insight, Stone said, for me. Robertson was scratching his head. I've got some more data on the Phantom crash. It was over the area west of Piedmont, at 23,000 feet. The post team has found evidence of the disintegration the pilot spoke of, but the material that was destroyed was a plastic of some kind. It was depolymerized. What does the post team make of that? They don't know what the hell to make of it, Robertson admitted. And there's something else. They found a few pieces of bone that have been identified as human. A bit of humerus and tibia, notable because they are clean, almost polished. Flesh burned away? Doesn't look that way, Robertson said. Stone frowned at Levitt. What does it look like? It looks like clean, polished bone, Robertson said. They say it's weird as hell. And there's something else. We checked into the National Guard around Piedmont. The 112th is stationed in a 100-mile radius. And it turns out they've been running patrols into the area for a distance of 50 miles. They've had as many as 100 men west of Piedmont. No deaths. None? You're quite sure? Absolutely. Were there men on the ground in the area the Phantom flew over? Yes, 12 men. They reported the plane to the base, in fact. Levitt said, sounds like the plane crash is a fluke. Stone nodded to Robertson. I'm inclined to agree with Peter. In the absence of fatalities on the ground. Maybe it's only in the upper air. Maybe. But we know at least this much. We know how Andromeda kills. It does so by coagulations, not disintegrations or bone cleaning, or any other damned thing. By coagulations. All right, Robertson said. Let's forget the plane for the time being. It was on that note that the meetings ended. Stone said, I think we'd better check our cultured organisms for biologic potency. Run some of them against a rat. Stone nodded. Make sure it's still virulent, still the same. Levitt agreed. They had to be careful the organism didn't mutate, didn't change to something radically different in its effects. As they were about to start, the level 5 monitor clicked on and said, Dr. Levitt, Dr. Levitt. Levitt answered. On the computer screen was a pleasant young man in a white lab coat. Yes. Dr. Levitt, we have gotten our electroencephalograms back from the computer center. I'm sure it's all a mistake, but... His voice trailed off. Yes, Levitt said. Is something wrong? Well, sir, yours were read as grade 4, atypical, probably benign. But we would like to run another set. Stone said, It must be a mistake. Yes, Levitt said, it must be. Undoubtedly, sir, the man said. But we would like another set of waves to be certain. I'm rather busy now, Levitt said. Stone broke in, talking directly to the technicians. Dr. Levitt will get a repeat EEG when he has this chance. Very good, sir, the technician said. When the screen was blank, Stone said, "There are times when this damned routine gets on anybody's nerves." Levitt said yes. They were about to begin biologic testing of the various culture media when the computer flashed that preliminary reports from X-ray crystallography were prepared. Stone and Levitt left the room to check the results, delaying the biologic tests of media. This was a most unfortunate decision, for had they examined the media, they would have seen that their thinking had already gone astray, and that they were on the wrong track. 25. Willis. X-ray crystallography analysis showed that the Andromeda organisms was not composed of component parts, as a normal cell was composed of nucleus, mitochondria, and ribosomes. Andromeda had no subunits, no smaller particles. Instead, a single substance seemed to form the walls and interior. This substance produced a characteristic precision photograph or scattered patterns of X-rays. Looking at the results, Stone said, "A series of six-sided rings." "And nothing else," Levitt said. "How the hell does it operate?" The two men were at a loss to explain how so simple an organisms could utilize energy for growth. "A rather common ring structure," Levitt said. A phenolic group, nothing more. It should be reasonably inert, yet it can convert energy to matter." Levitt scratched his head. He thought back to the city analogy and the brain cell analogy. The molecule was simple in its building blocks. It possessed no remarkable powers, taking a single units. Yet collectively it had great powers. "Perhaps there is a critical level," he suggested, "a structural complexity that makes possible what is not possible in a similar but simple structure." "The old chimp brain argument," Stone said. Levitt nodded. "As nearly as anyone could determine, the chimp brain was as complex as the human brain. There were minor differences in structure, but the major differences was size. The human brain was larger, with more cells, more interconnections, and that, in some subtle way, made the human brain different. Thomas Waldron, the neurophysiologist, once jokingly noted that the major difference between the chimp and human brain was that we can use the chimp as an experimental animal and not the reverse. Electron density mapping of Andromeda structure as derived from micrographic studies. It was this mapping which disclosed activity variations within an otherwise uniform structure. Photocurtsy Project Wildfire. Stone and Levitt puzzled over the problem for several minutes, until they came to the Fourier electron density scans. Here, the probability of finding electrons was mapped for the structure on a chart that resembled a topological map. They noticed something odd. The structure was present, but the Fourier mapping was inconstant. It almost looks, Stone said, as if part of the structure is switched off in some way. It's not uniform at all, Levitt said. Stone sighed, looking at the map. I wish to hell, he said, that we'd brought a physical chemist along on the team. Unspoken was the added comment instead of Hall. Tired, Hall rubbed his eyes and sipped the coffee, wishing he could have sugar. He was alone in the cafeteria, which was silent except for the muted ticking of the teleprinter in the corner. After a time, he got up and went over to the teleprinter, examining the rolls of paper that had come from it. Most of the information was meaningless to him. But then he saw one item which had come from the Deathmatch program. Deathmatch was a new scanning computer program that recorded all significant deaths according to whatever criterion the computer was fed. In this case, the computer was alerted to pick up all deaths in the Arizona, Nevada, California area and to print them back. The item he had read might have gone unnoticed were it not for Hall's conversations with Jackson. At the time, it had seemed like a pointless conversations to Hall, productive of little and consuming a great deal of time. But now he wondered. Print program Deathwatch. Deathmatch 998, scale 7, YOX40. Print as item from Associated Press verbatim. 778. Brush Ridge, Arizona. An Arizona Highway Patrol officer was allegedly involved in the death today of 5 persons in a highway diner. Miss Sally Carnova, waitress at the Dine E's Diner on Route 15, 10 miles south of Flagstaff, was the sole survivor of the incident. Miss Carnova told investigators that at 2:40 a.m., Officer Martin Willis entered the diner and ordered coffee and donut. Officer Willis had frequently visited the diner in the past. After eating, he stated that he had a severe headache and that his ulcer was acting up. Miss Carnova gave him 2 aspirin and a tablespoon of bicarbonate of soda. According to her statement, Officer Willis then looked suspiciously at the other people in the diner and whispered, "They're after me." Before the waitress could reply, Willis took out his revolver and shot the other customers in the diner, moving methodically from one to the next, shooting each in the forehead. Then he allegedly turned to Miss Carnova and smiling, said, "I love you, Shirley Temple," placed the barrel in his mouth, and fired the last bullet. Miss Carnova was released by police here after questioning. The name of the deceased customers are not known at this time. End item verbatim. End print. End program. Terminate. Hall remembered that Officer Willis had gone through Piedmont earlier in the evening, just a few minutes before the disease broke out. He had gone through without stopping, and had gone mad later on. Connections? He wondered. There might be. Certainly, he could see many similarities. Willis had an ulcer, had taken aspirin, and had eventually committed suicide. That didn't prove anything, of course. It might be a wholly unrelated series of events, but it was certainly worth checking. He punched a button on the computer console. The TV screen lighted, and a girl at a switchboard, with the headset pressing down her ear, smiled at him. "I want the chief medical officer for the Arizona Highway Patrol, the western sector, if there is one." "Yes, sir," she said briskly. A few moments later, the screen came back on. It was the operator. "We have a Dr. Smithson, who is the medical officer for the Arizona Highway Patrol, west of Flagstaff. He has no television monitor, but you can speak to him on audio." "Fine," Hall said. There was a crackling and a mechanical hum. Hall watched the screen, but the girl had shut down her own audio and was busy answering another call from elsewhere in the wildfire station. While he watched her, he heard a deep, drawling voice ask tentatively, "Anyone there?" "Hello, Doctor," Hall said. "This is Dr. Mark Hall in Phoenix. I'm calling for some information about one of your patrolmen, Officer Willis." The girl said it was some government thing, Smithson drawled. "That's right." "That is correct. We require—" "Dr. Hall," Smithson said, still drawling, "perhaps you'd identify yourself and your agency." It occurred to Hall that there was probably a legal problem involved in Officer Willis' death. Smithson might be worried about that. Hall said, "I am not at liberty to tell you exactly what it is." "Well, look here, Doctor. I don't give out information over the phone, and especially I don't when the fella at the other end won't tell me what it's all about." Hall took a deep breath. "Dr. Simpson, I must ask you." "Ask all you want. I'm sorry. I simply won't." At that moment, a bell sounded on the line, and a flat mechanical voice said, "Attention, please. This is a recording. Computer monitors have analyzed cable properties of this communications and have determined that the communications is being recorded by the outside party. All parties should be informed that the penalty for outside recordings of a classified government communications is a minimum of 5 years prison sentence. If the recording is continued, this connections will automatically be broken. This is a recording. Thank you." There was a long silence. Hall could imagine the surprise Smithson was feeling. He felt it himself. "What the hell kind of a place are you calling from anyhow?" Smithson said finally. "Turn it off," Hall said. There was a pause, a click, then, "All right, it's off." "I am calling from a classified government installations," Hall said. "Well, look here, mister. Let me be perfectly plain," Hall said. "This is a matter of considerable importance, and it concerns Officer Willis. No doubt there's a court inquiry pending on him, and no doubt you'll be involved. We may be able to demonstrate that Officer Willis was not responsible for his actions, that he was suffering from a purely medical problem. But we can't do that unless you tell us what you know about his medical status." And if you don't tell us, Dr. Smithson, and tell us damned fast, we can have you locked away for 12 years for obstructing an official government inquiry. I don't care whether you believe that or not. I'm telling you, and you'd better believe it. There was a very long pause, and finally the drawl. No need to get excited, Doctor. Naturally, now that I understand the situations. Did Willis have an ulcer? Ulcer? No. That was just what he said or was reported to have said. He never had an ulcer that I know of. Did he have any medical problem? Diabetes, Smithson said. Diabetes? Yeah, and he was pretty casual about it. We diagnosed him 5-6 years ago, at the age of 30. Had a pretty severe case. We put him on insulin, 50 units a day. But he was casual. Like I said, showed up in the hospital once or twice in coma, because he wouldn't take his insulin. Said he hated the needles. We almost put him off the force, because we were afraid to let him drive a car. Thought he'd go into acidosis at the wheel and conk out. We scared him plenty and he promised to go straight. That was 3 years ago, and as far as I know, he took his insulin regularly from then on. You're sure of that? Well, I think so. But the waitress at that restaurant, Sally Conover, told one of our investigators that she figured Willis had been drinking, because she could smell liquor on his breath. And I know for a fact that Willis never touched a drop in his life. He was one of these real religious fellows, never smoked and never drank. Always led a clean life. That was why his diabetes bothered him so. He felt he didn't deserve it. Hall relaxed in his chair. He was getting near now, coming closer. The answer was within reach. The final answer. The key to it all. One last question, Hall said. Did Willis go through Piedmont on the night of his death? Yes, he radioed in. He was a little behind schedule, but he passed through. Why? Is this something about the government tests being held there? No, Hall said. But he was sure Smithson's didn't believe him. Well, listen. We're stuck here with a bad case, and if you have any information which would, we will be in touch, Hall promised him, and clicked off. The girl at the switchboard came back on. Is your call completed, Dr. Hall? Yes, but I need information. What kind of information? I want to know if I have the authority to arrest someone. I will check, sir. What is the charge? No charge. Just to hold someone. There was a moment while she looked over at her computer console. Dr. Hall, you may authorize an official Army interview with anyone involved in project business. This interview may last up to 48 hours. All right, Hall said. Arrange it. Yes, sir. Who is the person? Dr. Smithson, Hall said. The girl nodded, and the screen went blank. Hall felt sorry for Smithson, but not very sorry. The man would have a few hours of shredding, but nothing more serious than that. And it was essential to halt rumors about Piedmont. He sat back in his chair and thought about what he had learned. He was excited and felt on the verge of an important discovery. 3 people, a diabetic in acidosis from failure to take insulin, an old man who drank sterno and took aspirin also in acidosis, a young infant. One had survived for hours. The other 2 had survived longer, apparently permanently. One had gone mad, the other 2 had not. Somehow, they were all interrelated. In a very simple way, acidosis, rapid breathing, carbon dioxide content, oxygen saturation, dizziness, fatigue. Somehow they were all logically coordinated, and they held the key to beating Andromeda. At that moment, the emergency bell sounded, ringing in a high-pitched, urgent way, as a bright yellow light began to flash. He jumped up and left the room. 26. The Seal. In the corridor, he saw the flashing sign that indicated the source of the trouble. Autopsy. Hall could guess the problem. Somehow the seals had been broken, and contaminations had occurred. That would sound the alarm. As he ran down the corridor, a quiet, soothing voice on the loudspeakers said, "Seal has been broken in autopsy. Seal has been broken in autopsy. This is an emergency." His lab technicians came out of the lab and saw him. "What is it?" "Button, I think infection spread." "Is he all right?" "Doubt it," Hall said. Running, she ran with him. Levitt came out of the morphology room and joined them. Sprinting down the corridor, around the gentle curves, Hall thought to himself that Levitt was moving quite well for an older man, when suddenly Levitt stopped. He stood riveted to the ground and stared straight forward at the flashing sign and the light above it, blinking on and off. Hall looked back. "Come on," he said. Then the technicians, "Dr. Hall, he's in trouble." Levitt was not moving. He stood, eyes open, but otherwise he might have been asleep. His arms hung loosely at his sides. "Dr. Hall." Hall stopped and went back. "Peter, boy, come on. We need you. We need your..." He said nothing more, for Levitt was not listening. He was staring straight forward at the blinking light. When Hall passed his hand in front of his face, he did not react. And then Hall remembered the other blinking lights, the lights Levitt had turned away from, had joked off with stories. "The son of a bitch," Hall said. "Now of all times." "What is it?" the technician said. A small dribble of spittle was coming from the corner of Levitt's mouth. Hall quickly stepped behind him and said to the technicians, "Get in front of him and cover his eyes. Don't let him look at the blinking light." "Why?" "Because it's blinking 3 times a second," Hall said. "You mean..." "He'll go any minute now." Levitt went with frightening speed. His knees gave way and he collapsed to the floor. He lay on his back and his whole body began to vibrate. It began with his hands and feet, then involved his entire arms and legs, and finally his whole body. He clenched his teeth and gave a gasping, loud cry. His head hammered against the floor. Hall slipped his foot beneath the back of Levitt's head and let him bang against its toes. It was better than having him hit the hard floor. Don't try to open his mouth, Hall said. You can't do it. He's clenched tight. As they watched, a yellow stain began to spread to Levitt's wrist. He may go into status, Hall said. Go to the pharmacy and get me 100 million milligrams of phenobarb. Now, in a syringe. We'll get him onto Dilantin later, if we have to. Levitt was crying through his clenched teeth, like an animal. His body raped like a tense rod against the floor. A few moments later, the technicians came back with a syringe. Hall waited until Levitt relaxed, until his body stopped its seizure, and then he injected the barbiturates. Stay with him, he said to the girl. If he has another seizure, just do what I did. Put your foot under his head. I think he'll be all right. Don't try to move him. And Hall ran down to the autopsy lab. For several seconds, he tried to open the door to the lab, and then he realized it had been sealed off. The lab was contaminated. He went on to the main control and found Stone looking at Burton through the closed-circuit TV monitors. Burton was terrified. His face was white and he was breathing in rapid, shallow gasps. And he could not speak. He looked exactly like what he was, a man waiting for death to strike him. Stone was trying to reassure him. Just take it easy, boy. Take it easy. You'll be okay. Just take it easy. I'm scared, Burton said. Oh, Christ, I'm scared. Just take it easy, Stone said in a soft voice. We know that Andromeda doesn't do well in oxygen. We are pumping pure oxygen through your lab now. For the moment, that should hold you. Stone turned to Hall. You took your time getting here. We just leave it. He fitted, Hall said. What? Your lights flash at 3 per second, and he had a seizure. What? Petit mal. It went on to a grand mal attack. Tonic-clonic seizure. Urinary incontinence. The whole bit. I got him onto phenobarb and came as soon as I could. Levitt has epilepsy? That's right, Stone said. He must not have known. He must not have realized. And then Stone remembered the request for a repeat electroencephalogram. Oh, Hall said. He knew all right. He was avoiding flashing lights, which will bring on an attack. I'm sure he knew. I'm sure he has attacks where he suddenly doesn't know what happened to him, where he just loses a few minutes from his life and can't remember what went on. Is he all right? We'll keep him sedated, Stone said. We've got pure oxygen running into Burton. That should help him until we know something more. Stone flicked off the microphone button connecting voice transmissions to Burton. Actually, it will take several minutes to hook in. But I've told him we've already started. He's sealed off in there, so the infection is stopped at that point. The rest of the base is okay at least. Hall said, How did it happen? The contaminations. Seal must have broken, Stone said in a lower voice. He added, We knew it would sooner or later. All isolation units break down after a certain time. Hall said, "You think it was just a random event?" "Yes," Stone said. "Just an accident. So many seals, so much rubber, of such and such a thickness. They'd all break, given time. Burton happened to be there when one went." Hall didn't see it so simply. He looked in at Burton, who was breathing rapidly, his chest heaving in terror. Hall said, "How long has it been?" Stone looked up at the stop clocks. The stop clocks were special timing clocks that automatically cut in during emergencies. The stop clocks were now timing the period since the seal broke. 4 minutes. Hall said, "Burton's still alive?" "Yes, thank God." And then Stone frowned. He realized the point. "Why," Hall said, "is he still alive?" "The oxygen? You said yourself the oxygen isn't running yet. What's protecting Burton?" At that moment, Burton said over the intercom, "Listen, I want you to try something for me." Stone flicked on the microphone. "What?" "Callison," Burton said. "No." Stone's reaction was immediately. "Damn it, it's my life." "No," Stone said. Hall said, "Maybe we should try." "Absolutely not. We don't dare. Not even once." Callison was perhaps the best kept American secret of the last decade. Callison was a drug developed by Janssen Pharmaceuticals in the spring of 1965. An experimental chemical designated UJ44759W, or K9 in the short abbreviations. It had been found as a result of routine screening tests employed by Janssen's for all new compounds. Like most pharmaceutical companies, Janssen tested all new drugs with a scattered approach, running the compounds through a standard battery of tests designed to pick up any significant biologic activity. These tests were run on laboratory animals, rats, dogs, and monkeys. There were 24 tests in all. Janssen found something rather peculiar about K9. It inhibited growth. An infant animal given the drug never attained full adult size. This discovery prompted further tests, which produced even more intriguing results. The drug, Janssen learned, inhibited metaplasia, the shifts of normal body cells to a new and bizarre form, a precursor to cancer. Janssen became excited and put the drug through intensive programs of study. By September 1965, there could be no doubt Callison stopped cancer. Through an unknown mechanism, it inhibited the reproduction of the virus responsible for myelogenous leukemia. Animals taking the drug did not develop the disease, and animals already demonstrating the disease showed a marked regressions as a result of the drug. The excitement at Janssen's could not be contained. It was soon recognized that the drug was a broad-spectrum antiviral agent. It killed the virus of polio, rabies, leukemia, and the common wart. And oddly enough, Callison also killed bacteria and fungi and parasites. Somehow, the drug acted to destroy all organisms, built on a unicellular structure or less. It had no effect on organ systems. Groups of cells organized into larger units. The drug was perfectly selective in this respect. In fact, calicin was the universal antibiotic. It killed everything, even the minor germs that caused the common cold. Naturally, there were side effects. The normal bacteria in the intestines were destroyed, so that all users of the drug experienced massive diarrhea. But that seemed a small price to pay for a cancer cure. In December 1965, knowledge of the drug was privately circulated among government agencies and important health officials. And then for the first time, oppositions to the drug arose. Many men, including Jeremy Stone, argued that the drug should be suppressed. But the arguments for suppression seemed theoretical, and Jensen, sensing billions of dollars at hand, fought hard for a clinical test. Eventually, the government, the Q, the FDA, and others agreed with Jensen and sanctioned further clinical testing over the protests of Stone and others. In February 1966, a pilot clinical trial was undertaken. It involved 20 patients with incurable cancer and 20 normal volunteers from the Alabama State Penitentiary. All 40 subjects took the drug daily for 1 month. Results were as expected. Normal subjects experienced unpleasant side effects, but nothing serious. Cancer patients showed striking remissions of symptoms consistent with cure. On March 1st, 1966, the 40 men were taking off the drug. Within 6 hours, they were all dead. It was what Stone had predicted from the start. He had pointed out that mankind had, over centuries of exposures, developed a carefully regulated immunity to most organisms. On his skin, in the ear, in his lungs, gut, and even bloodstream were hundreds of different viruses and bacteria. They were potentially deadly, but man had adapted to them over the years, and only a few could still cause disease. All this represented a carefully balanced state of affairs. If you introduced a new drug that killed all bacteria, you upset the balance and undid the evolutionary work of centuries. And you opened the way to superinfections. The problem of new organisms bearing new diseases. Stone was right. The 40 volunteers each had died of obscure and horrible diseases no one had ever seen before. One man experienced swelling of his body from head to foot, a hot, bloated swelling until he suffocated from pulmonary edema. Another man fell prey to an organisms that ate away his stomach in a matter of hours. A third was hit by a virus that dissolved his brain to a jelly. And so it went. Jensen reluctantly took the drug out of further study. The government, sensing that Stone had somehow understood what was happening, agreed to his earlier proposals and viciously suppressed all knowledge and experimentations with the drug calicin. And that was where the matter had rested for 2 years. Now Burton wanted to be given the drug. No, Stone said. Not a chance. It might cure you for a while, but you never survive later. When you were taken off. That's easy for you to say from where you are. It's not easy for me to say, believe me, it's not. He put his hand over the microphone again to Hall. We know that oxygen inhibits growth of the Andromeda strain. That's what we'll give Burton. It will be good for him. Make him a little giddy, a little relaxed, and slow his breathing down. Poor fellow is scared to death. Hall nodded. Somehow, Stone's phrase stuck in his mind. Scared to death. He thought about it, and then began to see that Stone had hit upon something important. That phrase was a clue. It was the answer. He started to walk away. Where are you going? I've got some thinking to do. About what? About being scared to death.